Memphis track boy, let's go, let's go, let's go.
My Colorado swing, my Colorado swing, my Colorado swing.
Welcome into a new BuffStampede Radio. Adam Munsterteiger, the publisher of BuffStampede.com, joined by football analyst William Gardner, here for another Sunday afternoon discussion about Colorado football. Thanks to Matt Smith for joining us last week. It's good to kind of break up things a little bit when things are slower in the off season. Good to answer some very random questions from the mailbag. But these Colorado players are coming back on campus as we do this. I was just on the social media, and you see all these guys coming back to town. So summer work is getting underway this coming week. How are you doing, William?
I am not too bad, working on a Sunday, and so that could be better, but that's the way it goes sometimes. So beautiful day outside, and hope everybody's having a nice weekend.
Well, good that you got a break in here to talk some CU football with us. Obviously, a couple late additions via the transfer portal to talk about on this show today. Let's start out with Northwestern offensive lineman transfer Cooper Lovelace. He spent some time at USC, before that at Butler Community College. A lot of experience, a lot of versatility. And this is, William, a seventh-year senior, which is a result of not only the COVID year not counting against eligibility, but this new JUCO ruling for this coming season that we've seen some other buffs like Preston Hodge take advantage of. I'm curious what your thoughts are on Cooper Lovelace. This is kind of like, BYU when they had those guys go off on a more mission and they were grown-ass men before they finished their eligibility. Lovelace is he is that.
Yeah, and he's he's a big guy. He's 6'5", 315, and he started almost a season's worth of games at the Power 4 level at between USC and Northwestern. My understanding is he started at center last year against Michigan, so that's going to, and they had two of the best defensive tackles in the nation. He's played every position except left tackle across the nearly decade that he's been in college. So I think he could fit in. I think people tend to write off. I don't know, that they tend to pick the one or two guys they think are going to start and write off everybody else. So I see people say, well, he's a depth piece. Well, I don't know. He started 9 games at Northwestern, so he's not a stiff. So I think he's a guy that can come in and compete at 4 out of the 5 positions. I think in a pitch, he could possibly be a backup to Seton if we needed that. So he's a guy with lots of experience. His technique ought to be good. And like I said, being at Northwestern last year, he's played against better guys than he's going to see this year.
Couple degrees already, USC, Northwestern, smart guy as well. Yeah, I would not peg him in as a definite depth piece. I think this is somebody that's coming in. And we talked last week on the show, William, and I thought you made a good point of, like, at that point, there were 15 offensive linemen on the roster for 2025, and now we got 16. And you made a good point of, like, there's not a whole lot. I mean, Jordan Seaton's kind of in a different category, but you go to number 2 down to 16. I don't know how much is separating them. I would put probably, Zach Chrysler a little bit higher than some guys, and maybe Xavier Hill would be a little bit higher than some guys. But generally, I think there's a lot of guys, and I think this is going to be a competition that runs deep into preseason camp.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the season, we may have different starters than we have at the beginning of the season, and not just because of injury too, guys coming along and what have you. But every single one of these 16 guys could conceivably play and play well this year. So I think it's I don't know. There was a little discussion on the board yesterday about with all the bodies and all the guys and all the experience that they have and their age and size, and several of them have started games at other places. I mean, Ogun B started some games at Texas A&M. So really, the question mark is, can they work together? And so there's enough talent and experience there to have a good offensive line, and it really comes down to the coaching staff. If we don't have a good offensive line this year, it's the coaches, period.
Yeah. Well, Yaya Atia, I think we're both high on, but he's a second-year buff coming over from overseas. Would you like to see Cooper Lovelace get his first reps at CU at center, just to kind of see how he factors in there?
Well, I don't know. I wasn't at the 15 spring practices to see who was getting reps there and how they looked and what have you. I think they got a variety of guys who could step in and get some reps at center. I think if Loveless was clearly not center as a first option last year. I think they stuck him in there at center because they had injuries and they needed to, and played that one game against Michigan. So he's got game experience. I mean, he will not see a better pair of defensive tackles in this conference than he saw against Michigan last year, but that's one game. So, I think that he brings an opportunity. He's a guy that could step in there. I think they just got a lot of guys that could play a lot of different positions. So I don't know what they're thinking. At this point, with all of them being close enough in their age and experience and whatever, I don't have favorites. I still think Philip Houston is a lot better player than people think he is, but whatever the coaches are going to do is what they're going to do. They brought these guys in with an idea. I'm sure they didn't just bring them in willy nilly, and I'm sure they've got an idea of where each guy is going to fit at practice number one. But then they've got all summer for those guys to practice and with each other and try to make a statement for why they should be the guy.
It's like we're talking about. There's 16 guys that you could see. You wouldn't be shocked if any of them plays heavy snaps for the Colorado Buffaloes this fall. Is there any concern that they could fall into a game of musical chairs, given that there's not a lot separating these guys? Or should we just, if you're a Colorado fan, should you just be happy that they have this depth that we have not seen on the offensive line in Boulder in a very long time?
Well, I think we're going to find out. Everybody thinks, and I think there's truth to it, that playing together and having some chemistry is a big deal on the offensive line. But we're going to find out if in the new era you can do this with a bunch of new guys on the offensive line every year. I think that the three offensive line coaches and Shermer have to be on the same page in terms of what they're doing in expectations and play calling and what have you. There's a lot of things you can do with play calling that's going to help out an offensive line, but they have to have an idea going into that first practice who's going to line up at what spot and then see who gets it done. So, it's a whole new world in college football, and we're going to find out if you can do it this way. So, I don't know. I think Zarian McGill, I think, is a guy that people are overlooking. We did, however we did the last 2 years with centers that I think McGill is better than those guys.
Yeah.
So that's an improvement. He's 6'2", 6'3", 310, going to be bigger. I think he's got more game experience than either one of those. He got more game experience than anybody we played at center the last 3 years. Yeah, I think that's going back to what's his name that left. But so I don't know. There's a lot of guys there, and we wait and see what happens. I don't know. I think it's I think we'll probably see in the comments different people will have different favorites and who they think is going to be the guy. But I couldn't hazard a guess at this point, just based on all the guys, and it would not shock me to see any one of those 15 guys line up to the right of Jordan Seaton in any order from left to right, frankly, except that, I don't think McGill's going to play anywhere but center, but aside from that, anything could happen.
And just closing out with Loveless, he was a wrestling star in high school and actually didn't play organized football until his senior year, playing in East Kansas, and had to actually go the JUCO route just because he didn't have a whole lot of film. And that was back in 2019. So he redshirted. 2020 was canceled at the JUCO ranks. He played center, guard, and tackle at the JUCO level. Goes to USC, plays both guard spots and right tackle. And then, like we talked about, he played center against Michigan last year, but started 9 games at left tackle. So he's got quite a bit of experience. And this is a really nice late addition. There just is not a whole lot left in the portal at this point. I mean, this is as good as you're going to get at this point.
Well, I mean, and a guy that started 9 games in a Power 4 conference, hard to do better than that anyway. I mean, I don't know what people think you're going to get out of the portal every year. First round draft picks, those guys aren't moving. Wow.
Well, the first year was Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, so maybe the expectations were out of whack from the jump, right?
Right, but that's and that's an entirely different situation. They had a connection to the coach, and the whole situation was entirely different. They came in as a package from day one. But on the offensive line, the guys that people want, the first and second round draft picks, they're not moving because they're already starting.
Right. Let's move on to the other recent transfer commit, and that is Sean Myers coming over from North Alabama. He was initially a JUCO guy as well. He's out of Ohio. He went to Hocking College, All-American there, heads to North Alabama, starts 22 games, team captain, recorded a total of 105 tackles during those 2 seasons. He missed most of last season due to injury. And I saw somebody on our message board ask what the injury was there. Obviously, it was a severe enough injury to keep him out the rest of the season. But I got to look into that. But obviously, he's healthy now. Describes himself as a film junkie. And, this is a position that is wide open. I thought Martavius French made a really strong case to be a starter this spring. We like kind of the resume of Reginald Hughes coming in. You like some of the playmaking ability of Jeremiah Brown, but this is, and maybe Kylan Salter comes in there, but this is an opportunity for, I think, Sean Myers to kind of burst on the scene a little bit.
Yeah, and again, he's a guy that's been around a while and played a lot of football and played his position quite a bit and got a lot of experience. Some people will discount it entirely because it wasn't at this level, but I wouldn't do that at linebacker. I think things get faster up here, but you're still reading the same kind of keys and watching the same kind of movements. People still do the same sorts of things with running backs and guards and whatever at the lower levels. So again, he's another guy. People say, "Oh, nice depth piece." Huh? I might be more than that. I like him describing himself as a guy who watches a lot of film and sees things develop before other guys. Somebody compared that to Nate Landman, which is in theory and concept, not a bad comparison, but to compare him to a guy who's the best linebacker in the last quarter of a century here and doing great in the NFL, I think is a little bit of a stretch. But the point is correct, and I think that with that he can overcome. He's not the biggest guy in the world. But if he gets there a little sooner than everybody else because he can diagnose things, then so be it, But I think he's a good addition. I'd like to have another couple of guys. I mean, I think, and we'll probably get into this in one of our later questions, but I am still concerned about that linebacker room with only 6 guys on scholarship. So he's got to be a guy. Frankly, every single one of them's got to pan out.
I got to bring this up because you brought him up. Nate Landman did not have a lot of help around him on defense during his time at CU, right? No. Especially the 3 seasons when he was kind of the main catalyst defensively. Right. If he had a rock star cast around him, no question he's an All-American, right?
You would think. I mean, there's no reason why he wouldn't be. I mean, with if he had a crazy defensive line in front of him, he'd probably making every tackle in the background or in the backfield. With his vision and instincts and people write that off as not being a real thing. But when you're standing there at linebacker, and I've always likened it to standing in the middle of I-25, trying to dodge cars, right? But it really is about how fast your eyes and your brain process things and you react to that process. It's more that than just flat out quickness and speed. And I think, everybody always focused on the 40 time type of speed for Nate Landman, and that's not really relevant. It's fast twitch and how fast you can move left and right and short distances and make those reactions. So yeah, you see him now, he's doing great now with better defensive lines in front of him.
Yeah, and he signed with the Rams this offseason after a nice run with the Falcons. On BuffStampede.com, we have a 60% off promotion going on for annual VIP subscriptions right now. If you've ever thought about signing up for BuffStampede.com, this is the time to do it. 60% off, and this is going to bring you through the next year. We're going to get a chance to give you all of our inside information throughout an entire year. So try to take advantage of that if you can. I think it runs through next week. So definitely a good time to sign up for BuffStampede.com if you've ever thought about it. Today's episode is brought to us by Macaulay Capital Fractional CFO Services. Is your business looking for financial guidance and support, but not yet big enough to hire a full-time CFO? Well, we have a solution for you. Hiring a fractional CFO who can work with your business on a part-time basis. You get the benefit of having a seasoned financial expert on your team without the commitment or expense of a full-time hire. And here's the best part. It's likely that a partnership with Macaulay Capital will be a win-win situation, meaning that your business will make more money from the guidance of a fractional CFO than the total cost of partnering with us. For more information or to set up a meeting, please visit MacaulayCapital.com. That's MCCAULEY Capital.com. William, everybody that listens to our podcast knows that we love the Hungry Toad. They've been bringing a taste of England to Boulder since 1991. At the Hungry Toad, they serve up hearty homemade fare from their scratch kitchen paired with a brilliant selection of British beers. They're the perfect spot for friends and family to gather, relax, and enjoy the warm, welcoming atmosphere. If you're mad for football, so are they. Whether it's the American gridiron or European footy, they proudly support CU football and CU women's soccer. The Hungry Toad, Boulder's local pub that's not on Pearl Street. Head to 2543 Broadway in Boulder.
And you know what? Hans Serrata don't take no whoopings either. He hands them out. How's that for a second?
I love it. I love it. William, I'm curious, what is the spring edition that has you most excited?
Well, I think it's still Jaheim Otis at the
spring edition. You're talking overall edition, but yeah, that works. Yeah, you can go with that.
Yeah, I mean, I now I'd have to figure out who came later and who came earlier. It's too many names and too much stuff for my old brain to figure out.
I'm going to throw them at you. Running back, DeKalen Taylor. Receiver, Sincere Brown. Receiver, Hakeem Williams. Receiver, Jack Histera. Offensive lineman, Xavier Hill. Offensive lineman, Cooper Lovelace. Offensive lineman, Larry Johnson III. Offensive lineman, Andre Roy Jr. Offensive lineman, Walker Anderson. Linebacker, Sean Myers. Cornerback, Tayon Parks. Cornerback, Noah King. Cornerback, Tyricus Davis coming over from Wyoming, safety Terrence Love, and safety John Slaughter. Did one of those names make you excited?
Wow, that's a lot of dudes, man. I just got to kind of go through it in my head. I think, the couple of the receivers have a lot of real potential, like Sincere Brown and Hakeem Williams, came out of high school as all world. And so if they ever live up to that, that's going to be pretty amazing. I think both Xavier Hill and Larry Johnson are big offensive linemen, big experienced offensive linemen. That Johnson comes from Tennessee, and people liked him a lot there. So I think those two kind of stand out to me. Andre Roy is a huge offensive tackle that comes in with some playing experience at this level. They really kind of went nuts on bringing in offensive linemen, and I don't know if that means they're sick of the crap from the last 2 years. Or
I think so. I think that's a fair assumption.
I think they were not satisfied with what they had in spring as enough guys for depth and competition, or whatever. But man, you got to give them credit. They got a lot of guys to come in here clearly without any promise that you're playing. You get a chance to compete. That's all you get, and the best man wins the job, and that's that. But I think
they have a good track record. I'm sorry to cut you off. They have a good track record of that, right? The hard work translating to this staff is going to warm up to you, love you up, And it doesn't mean that you have to be perfect like Quincy Wiggins has hung around, but you've gotta show up and show that effort for this staff to really buy into you. And but it really could be Charlie Offerdahl, a walk on, or
Right.
Ben Finiseth. It doesn't have to be a guy that came in with the Hakeem 5-star rating out of high school, right?
Well, and I think that's what the thing. It doesn't matter whether you're highly rated or low rated. I think that's, probably what they like about a Jack Hestera or Sean Myers, is that work ethic. And I think they are, people are saying like, we don't have enough money to give a big enough bag. Well, I don't think that's exactly the case. I think we're crossing off some of those people from our side because they're not our kind of people. They don't.
Oh, that definitely happens. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't want to come in here and work the way we want them to work, and they want guarantees and promises, and Coach Prime ain't doing that. So
I got a list of guys I could list off there, but it's no
Yeah.
point in putting them on blast, right? I mean, you can kind of tell which guys, talk highly of CU and then kind of fall off the radar pretty quickly.
right, and they disappear. But some other guys. I mean, there's a lot of names in there that I think Noah King at safety is interesting.
He's going to start out a cornerback, it sounds like, but I could see with safety not being quite as deep as cornerback
Right.
that could change pretty quickly for sure.
Terrence Love at safety, Tion Parks. I mean, there's a lot of new bodies coming in this summer, and that then I don't know. Tyreek Davis played a lot of football, so there's really a lot of guys. There's not anybody that is the obvious sort of guy like a Zy Chrysler or a who did I say before? Jaheim Otis, is an obvious choice. If Jaheim Otis and Zach Atkins at tight end is going to be pretty critical. So I don't know.
You know who has me most excited, William?
Huh.
Xavier Hill from Memphis. I really think that he's going to be a starter for this team. It's hard to know exactly where you peg him in because he's got that positional versatility.
Right.
He's played 4 of those 5 offensive line spots. He did start out at LSU, started a couple games there. He was Memphis's top-rated player last year. So I see him as a guy that's going to come in and do some exciting stuff.
Yeah, and all these guys come in with a chip on their shoulder, wanting to prove something and wanting to make their way to the next level. So they've all got the incentive to put the hard work in and really come out, throwing punches. So it ought to be an interesting summer and see who comes to the fore.
Are there any spring additions you feel are underrated?
Yeah, absolutely. DeKalon Taylor. I don't think anybody's. I watched that kid's film, and I think he's going to be and I don't get comments. I don't give a damn, but I think DeKalon Taylor might be the better of all the running backs. Quite frankly, I mean, I hear what the coaches are saying about God's sakes,
Dalen Hayden.
Dallin Hayden, but I wasn't there to see it, so am I taking their word for it? Well, I don't know. We'll see. I think DeKalon Taylor, based on the film I've seen of him playing in college, brings a lot to the table, and I think he's a pretty exciting looking guy. He's not the biggest guy in the world for sure, but that's the guy that sort of jumps out to me out of this spring group as the most underrated, that people are not given credit, I think, for what he brings to the table, because he's one that everybody says, death piece, third guy, whatever. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, I think somewhat of the issue there is people are frustrated with that position.
Yeah.
When Marshall Faulk gets named the head coach, you think you're going to get, at the very least, keep a guy like Isaiah Augustov. In the best case scenario, bring in this great all-conference type guy at the position. That didn't happen. That's not on DeKalon Taylor. He obviously did a great job at Incarnate Word, and he's going to be a guy that's going to factor in at kickoff and punt return. So he's going to have a big impact on this team. I don't think he's a feature back, but I think that he is a big addition to this program. They're going to need him. They're definitely going to need DeKalon Taylor to step up. And it wouldn't shock me, I guess, if he led the team in rushing this year.
I think he'd be a big play guy. I think he's a guy that's going to be, he's going to be different than the other two, and is a home run hitter every time he steps. Possibly, if he when he ever he gets the ball, and there's a lot of things you can do with him out of the backfield and such. With his speed, he's got quickness and shiftiness, and hips, and can make people miss, which I think is a big deal. But so I think that's the most underrated guy coming in so far.
I thought Terrence Love was my most underrated guy, a former blue chip high school recruit, played 22 games at Auburn, did not allow any passes in coverage. Now, a lot of his action was on special teams, but he did get in on defense and was solid when he did. He was a two-way guy in high school, good ball skills. And so I see him as a guy that they're going to need on the field. We've kind of focused on running back and linebacker as far as these depth concerns. Safety's another one of those positions. You can start to lose guys pretty quick at that position, and especially with targeting rules and guys getting kicked out of games. And so, I think Terrence Love has got to be a guy that steps up, and I think he should be rated higher than he is right now.
Yeah, and he's got great size, and he can help you in a variety of ways. You can walk him up to the line of scrimmage and play games with him that way. And so he's a guy that I think can help us in a variety of different ways.
Which spring edition do you believe is most overrated?
I don't know that I've heard anybody being overrated. I guess it depends on how you define the word. I haven't heard anybody really raving about anybody in the group. Going down to see. I mean, I think the guys that people talk about, like Zach Atkins and Jaheim Otis, are deserving. I don't know. I'm just going up and down the list of.
Well, I wrote down Jack Histera because he's got an 87 rating on 247. Not nothing against him, but he's rated higher than Cooper Lovelace, DeKalen Taylor, John Slaughter, Terrence Love. I don't know if that lines up the way I see it just from, and this is not a shot at Jack Histera. He's obviously it's pretty cool, the story that he's been on, coming to Colorado as a walk-on, making some plays, going off on scholarship, making big plays at both Charlotte and Utah State, and coming back home on scholarship. But there are so many receivers on this roster, William.
Yeah.
How are you going to get him on the field a whole lot?
I guess I was thinking of overrated based on how he's received by people on the boards and fans and stuff, and what they're talking about, because I don't think everybody except aside from the 87 rating, basically everybody said the same thing you did.
Yeah.
Which is, how's he going to get playing time? But then,
if he leads the team in receiving this year, that's fine, because he's doing that over guys like Traylon Miller, Amari Miller, Joseph Williams, Hakeem Williams, Sincere Brown, Isaiah Harge, Quentin Gibson, Quindell Farrakhan Jr., Terrell Timmons Jr. Who am I forgetting? I mean, they have so much talent at that position, and so much of it is unproven talent, but it's there, that talent.
But I'll guarantee you right now that there will be a comment on either in YouTube or the board that saying that if Jack Castero leads us in receiving, we're in trouble. So
I didn't even say Cam Michael there. But by the way, I think he's going to be a running back by the end of the season. That's my bold prediction.
Cam Michael, yeah, some of those that somebody's going to have to play at that spot. So.
Well, at least put him in the Wildcat. You've seen his high school film, haven't you, Cam Michael?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh man. If he's as fast as he was back in high school, he's a threat every time he touches the ball.
I think they've got a lot of guys that have some positional flexibility that can allow them to do things. I think they got a lot of guys. I think they got a lot of guys on offense that can give them the depth at running back that they need. Pretty thin at tight end, but I don't know how they're going to use that. Well, they might be limited in how they can use it based on the fact that they only really got two of them. I'm not counting on Corbin Lazier, and I don't think Zane DeSouza will ever play at this level, but that position is very thin, so they have to be careful how to use it and whatever. But in terms of the receivers and running backs and whatever, they got a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things. And then they're going to have to find some guys on defense and do the same thing in the secondary, guys that can play, corner, safety, nickel, whatever. And then they're going to have to look at some guys like Keaton Wade, maybe, I don't know, maybe Quincy Wiggins or something that can do some standing up and playing a little linebacker too. Unless, if all 6 of the scholarship linebacker guys are aces, then, 6 is enough if they're all there. But how often does that happen?
Right. Yeah.
That all of them are living up to expectations and are ready to go. But, I've seen crazier stuff happen. We went through last year and mostly 2 guys playing the whole season at linebacker. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Overall, do you think the Buffs improved themselves this springs in terms of what is coming and going personnel wise?
I think, in terms of a larger question, in terms of the team itself, I think that question begins and ends with Caden Salter and Julian Lewis and Ryan Staub. How much do those guys, if one of those guys doesn't pick up that quarterback and do pretty well with it, then probably not. Because, we're moving away from an era of an outstanding quarterback. I think positionally, if we went by position, some are better, some are not. I think offensive line is clearly better. I think receiver
D-line's better. Yeah.
Yeah, D-line is better. I think if I could just go down from the top down, you don't know about quarterback, running back.
The bar was set so low. They literally ranked last in the country in rushing offense last 2 seasons.
And I'd like that. I'd like to have Isaiah Augustov back, but it doesn't sound to me like he meshed with Falk very well. And if that's the case, so be it. But I was hoping, like everyone else, to see a bigger splash of an addition at running back. So is it better? I'd almost call it a push. Maybe slightly worse, I guess. I don't know. I guess you got to ask yourself, is DeKalen Taylor, probably it's worse because we lost both Hood and Augustov, although, some will say Hood wasn't really good enough for this level. So I don't know. I think the running back is probably a push. Receiver, probably a push, depending on how they do. It's hard to say. It's hard to say we didn't get worse when you got 3 guys in the NFL.
Yeah.
The
depth is improved. It's just going to be a deeper, different looking group for sure.
Right.
I like at running back, if Dallin Hayden is much better, then you're mitigating some of that.
Right.
If RJ Johnson is a solid number 2 cornerback on the outside, that mitigates Colton Hood leaving. We just don't know if those 2 guys are really going to step up to the challenge the way they need to. If they do, then I would say they improved themselves because they have improved depth on the O-line. They have improved depth at safety. They have improved spots across the team. But go ahead.
The one position where they're clearly worse, both in starting talent and depth, is linebacker.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see how you could possibly argue that. We lost 2 starters and we don't have anybody at that level. Now, we may end up with somebody at that level, and I don't mean somebody new coming in, but 2 of these guys might step into that position just like going into last year. It wasn't a sure thing that either one of those 2 guys was going to be playing at that level. So we may have 2 guys do that, but looking at it right now at the beginning of summer, even the most optimistic Buff fan has to say, that linebacker position is worse off than it was a year ago. And I think edge, in terms of the front line talent, well, it's almost the same, but I'd have to say the edge position is not as good as it was a year ago at this time.
But when you consider that Arden Walker and Samson Kafavalu, or Samson Okunlola Kafavalu, that's a 2016 reference there. Sammy Okunlola, those guys are much more experienced now.
Right, but you lose Deion Hayes, you lose who else was the other one we lost?
Tajay McCoy. But you can only put a couple of those guys out, right?
But we worked
at a time.
We played about 6 deep on the edge last year, I think. I think Keaton Wade is more of a known I think Arden Walker and Sammy Okunlola are likely the best best edge players in the conference. If Sammy's healthy, I don't think there's no question in my mind. Arden Walker's the best edge player in the conference, no question. And I expect him to have, maybe an All-American level season because he's that good. Quincy Wiggins is the talk of spring ball, and we'll see what comes of that. But Keaton Wade was a guy that used in certain packages late in the season. His havoc rate, his number of plays made per plays played was crazy. If he could exert that kind of influence over an entire game, my God, he'd be a first round pick too. So there's three guys you feel pretty good about. Quincy Wiggins feel pretty good about. London Merritt looks good. McPherson looks good, but they're both true freshmen. So there's just 1, 2, 6 guys, So I'd like to see that better. I have to say, you got 2 of the same guys you had last year, but you don't have really anything added. So it has to be, to me, not as good as a year ago. So I don't think we improved ourselves at edge.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to see more Walker, Okunlola, and Wade, and if those guys can stay healthy, yeah, maybe the depth isn't as good, but more reps out of those 3 guys.
Yeah,
and I think London Merritt's going to be, by the end of this coming season, a guy that you're going to want to see out there. And
I think Samuel Okunlola's got first round potential. Okay, I think Arden Walker's got draft pick potential. And if the guys both live up to what they can be this year, oh man, it could be something special. There were some new start times and TV announced for games with the Buffaloes this coming 2025 season. We now know that week 2, their Saturday, September 6th game against Delaware State in Boulder is going to kick off at 1:30 p.m. Mountain on Fox. Going to be a little bit of a warm afternoon, I would imagine then, but I love to see those afternoon kicks. Week 3, Friday, September 12th at Houston, 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time on ESPN. Going to be a humid one down there in Houston. And then they also announced that CU's home contest against BYU on Saturday, September 27th is going to kick off at 8:15 p.m. on ESPN. And then we already knew that the season opener against Georgia Tech at Folsom Field on Friday, September 29th, or August 29th, sorry, will kick off at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Of these games, any of them stand out? Like, is BYU going to become a rival of the Buffs? I was going to also mention that we know that when we play in the Big 12 championship, that'll be a noon kickoff. Okay. All right. Well, put it out there. Thanks for putting that out there, people. Do you have hate in your heart for BYU after what happened down in San Antonio? I don't. You know what? There's nobody on this schedule anymore that I really look at and go, that Kansas State would be the closest, but they're not on there. They go to Manhattan in November. You know what? I've never really even hated Kansas State. There's just really nobody on here that makes me feel that sort of animosity. There's nobody. I've always had respect for Utah and BYU. My issues with BYU, and they may have some trouble coming, but my issue with them is more cultural. But that's a whole other ballgame. But I don't know. There's nobody on this schedule at all to me that really gets my blood flowing in that sort of sense. Now that we beat Utah pretty good last year and ended the long string of getting used by them, but I don't know. I don't think we have an obvious rival yet. BYU is only one game, and so rivals have to develop naturally. Not necessarily a rivalry, but is there building animosity? Again, I think that doesn't develop in one game either. Okay. We've only played them once in forever, really, right? So Utah's got a history with us. Kansas State's got a history with us, but it's a long time ago. Arizona State, we got a little bit of a history, but I don't know. Kind of hard to be mad at Arizona State. Typically they're not all that great. They had a good season last year, but I don't know. It's an interesting schedule. I think it's fun to have Wyoming instead of CSU. we'll see what comes of that. But it's an interesting schedule to me. But there's nobody that really stands out to me as those frickin' Delaware Blue Hens, man. We're gonna beat them, and then we're gonna go in the stands and get their moms, and then we're gonna go back to Delaware and burn their homes down.
Yeah, good point. Good point. That's not happening.
Because their helmets look like Michigan. Got it? So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I felt more towards, in terms of early season games, I felt a lot more towards North Dakota State than I do at Delaware. I don't know. I don't know, Delaware. Aside from the helmets, is there anything about Delaware that stands out as a football program? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I have not paid close attention to the Blue Hens. I do like their logo.
Yeah, do they have a blue hen mascot that could fight a chip?
Maybe. I think we just got to figure out Ralphie. We don't need to be. We need to focus on ourselves right now with our mascot program before we start.
We don't have a Ralphie right now. We got Chip and we got a large dog.
Okay.
We got a large dog with both. That headband with the. How do they
the horns?
How do they do it? Is it like? Oh, there it is. It's like that, right? Yeah. 60-year-old guy trying to be cool didn't go well. It wasn't pretty, was it? All right. But yeah, we go. The headbands got the horns. We got one of those on a big dog, and a big dog. Even with a hamburger in front of its mouth, won't run.
Moving along. You know who I want to give a shout out to, William? Ryan Staub. Do you know how many quarterbacks do you think would have stuck around Colorado as long as he has? And I'm thinking that in this portal era, he's got to be as good a third string quarterback as anybody in the country has, right?
I would think, yeah, or maybe even better than most people's second string quarterback. I mean, most teams aren't having a huge quarterback battle every year, so I think Ryan Staub's a lot better. We'll get to business in the comments on this one too. God forbid you say something nice about Ryan Staub. You might as well throw in Cash Cleveland and who else were some of them?
Hank Zelinskis.
Yeah, you're right. Talk about and offered all, and then people feel like, why are you talking about those guys? Well, they're on the team. I don't know. We're talking about guys that are on a team. What do you want? Get out of here. Beat it. Go and take your medication.
No, I mean, you would have not felt good about the quarterback depth coming into the season if Ryan Staub wasn't here right now. You never know when you're going to need a third quarterback.
Yeah. No, and I think he's a guy that when he goes out on the field, you can feel very confident that he's going to be competent and get the job done and do a good job. You're not going to look for Shedeur Sanders type of output from him, but that's not his role. I mean, he's I don't know. He's who's the guy that was the backup to John Elway his whole career at the Broncos from Texas A&M. I don't know, somebody come up with it, but he's not the guy you wanted to start at any given year, but you knew if something happened to Elway and he had to miss a game or a couple of series or whatever, you had a competent guy to go in and get the job done.
Yeah.
Ryan Staub's going to be prepared. He's going to find somebody open. He's not going to throw for a gazillion yards or necessarily avoid a pass rush or whatever. But he's a guy that goes out there. He's there for his teammates. He's there for the program and the team. So he's a guy to me, like Charlie Offerall, should be celebrated. I don't know.
Yeah, it's one thing to anoint them as a guy that's going to be all conference, another thing to appreciate what they bring to the football team on a daily basis.
Right. Ben Finney, like what they bring in the locker room and in the weight room every single day, all year round is maybe more valuable than what they bring on the field at any given time. But it's something that has value to a football team, and they ought to be celebrated for it.
We're going to do our top 40 Buffs countdown soon. This year, it's going to be a challenging exercise because I think we guess who's number one on the list, but you start getting further down that list, you're going to be splitting hairs with a lot of these guys. I'm curious, as we get into that project, William, is there a Buff player that people are just not talking enough about going into the summer?
Um, I had to stop myself for half a second to think who's the obvious number one, and then I was like, oh, hello, duh, you know, one of my guys. Um, I don't know. I think they're so quiet about what comes out of spring ball. I think one guy, Savell Smalls, I think I saw a lot from him. He's coming into his final year, and he was a 5-star athlete coming out of high school, and he got the ability to do things. So that's one guy. Like I said, out of all the offensive linemen, it's too hard to pick one of those guys out of there. Um, Amari McNeil's kind of been forgotten, and he was playing at, frankly, an All-America level the last few games. If he'd have played that way all season, he'd got noticed nationally. So he's one. I think Anquan Barnes had a huge spring. Something really came on for him. That whole defensive line group, quite frankly, had a big spring. Torian Carter was a starter last year at the beginning of the season until he got hurt. So I know you said one guy, but I think if I was going to say if there's a position that people aren't talking enough about, it's defensive tackle, because we got some guys, man. Holy cow, we got some guys. And then I'm gonna go back again, and this may seem counterintuitive, but the guy people aren't talking enough about is Arden Walker. Nobody really gives him enough credit for what he did last year, both in the run game and the pass. I see people on our board say, yeah, he's fine in the pass game, but he wasn't that great in the run game. That's just crap. That's just, you weren't watching, because, he may not have made the tackles, but he was setting the edge and turning them back inside so those two inside linebackers could make the play. So that's a guy.
Yeah, I'd like to throw Preston Hodge in there too.
Yeah.
I think that JUCO ruling, bringing him back for a year, was like landing a blue chip recruit,
Yeah.
or a transfer. If it wasn't for Avery Johnson throwing the best pass that he threw that entire football game at Folsom Field against the Buffs last year, late in the fourth quarter, I think we would have looked back on Preston Hodges' 2024 season and probably given him an A or an A minus, right? Maybe you go B plus because of that throw. But I mean, Preston was right there. He was on that receiver's hip pocket, and it just was a great throw.
Well, I think, great players make great plays, and great players sometimes get beat by other great players, whatever. But I think both Preston Hodge and DJ McKinney got overlooked to some extent for what they did last year, both locally and nationally, because of the obvious presence of Travis Hunter, and then so frankly, guys that were not, people are not talking enough about in that secondary is those two guys, and R.J. Johnson and Carter Stoutmeyer and Tawfiq Bayard. There's some guys back there.
Omari Miller on offense too. I think maybe a guy that's slipped a little bit under the radar because he got hurt last season and was not a full participant during spring ball, but he's had a couple stretches against Kansas State last year and against USC his first year that, you can tell that when he puts it all together, he's going to be a number one or a number two receiver at worst.
Yeah, well, if that game, that 2 years ago against USC, if he did that in every game, he's a first-round draft pick. So then you got to put it together and have be more consistent and not get hurt. So yeah, Zach Atkins is a guy. I don't know. There's a lot of guys. I don't know. It almost feels to me like nobody talks about football and football players. It's all about NIL and whether Shador is going to be the quarterback in Cleveland, and I don't know, all that kind of junk.
Or Dan Lanning, that always works its way into the discussion as well.
The beluga whale.
Yeah. You did see that recruit decommitted from Oregon, right?
Yeah. Jumped in a pool with a 17-year-old for no reason.
Yeah. Well, this is a good way to close out the show. But before I do, William, I got to thank NC Buff for producing the newsstand on BuffStampede.com for more than 20 years. I remember initially we had this logo and this idea, and when I left Rivals, they kept him around there, and other people have kind of gotten his links, and I was always like, give as much information to CU fans as you can. I never harbored any bad will there, and just have always appreciated Craig. And we know that he's stood strong in his battle with cancer, and he's looking forward to spending his mornings doing some painting and traveling and not putting together links for Buffs fans. But I do want to send out a heartfelt thanks to him, because that was something that Colorado fans have enjoyed for a long time.
Yeah, and especially back in the years before we had Coach Prime, and there was so much coverage and whatever, back before Coach Prime, there wasn't a lot of coverage. He'd go out and find every single thing and put it up there. So
Yeah,
a lot of kudos and a lot of respect. I mean, the man's in his 80s, got through cancer. I mean, he's long since should have been, doing what he wants to do.
yeah, definitely. No, this is a good ride off into the sunset, and
Yeah,
hopefully he's got a lot of travel coming up in his life.
I think if you think my 84-year-old ass is going to be on here doing this, you might be mistaken.
We'll take it year by year, but you never know.
Right.
You never, are you not enjoying yourself, William?
Well, I don't know. I'm just thinking that's 24 years down the road from now, man. I'm already getting aches and pains now. So,
Okay. Well, if you need to do it from a recliner at some point, we can
or the dock,
send our technical team over and get you hooked
where
up.
I'm fishing. Like, hey, hold on, I got one. Be right back.
We'll figure out a way. I'm like a parasite, William. You can't get me out of your system. We're gonna keep you on BuffStampede.com as long as we can.
I hear you, brother. Well, I ain't going anywhere anytime soon. I don't think. I got to look behind me, see if anybody's catching up or sneaking up.
Well, next week we're gonna get into some of the early summer, winter, the summer strength and conditioning work, and get a chance to kind of respond to some of that stuff. There will be more recruits coming through Boulder from the prep ranks in June, so we'll have a lot to talk about there. And then, William, I think we're going to dive into not only our top Buffs countdown, but our depth chart predictions as well. So we've got plenty to fill up these next, I don't know, what is it, about 8 more episodes before we get into preseason camp.
Yeah, we always find something.
So, well, I appreciate you, William, and appreciate everybody out there for tuning in.